So today is my 1,653rd daily trash pickup here at my home park. It is Friday, February 2nd, 2024. About a half bucket of trash here in the gorgeous Eaton Canyon, and we now have a behemoth storm on our doorstep here in Southern California. This one looks big. It's not big in terms of its strength, it's big in terms of the sheer amount of time that we are going to be sitting underneath an atmospheric river getting pounded by very heavy rainfall. So because this is a long video, I can't post it onto Twitter. I'm going to be putting it onto Friends of Eaton Canyon Facebook group, probably as a YouTube video. But I am sure a lot of people in our local area are asking, what is the fate of our beautiful wash? What is going to happen to this place? This is a big rainstorm. We haven't seen something like this in 1 year, actually a little bit less than 1 year. So are we totally going to be fine because that storm in late February 2023 wasn't all that bad? Well, there's it's way more complex than that. And I'm going to be going over quite a few different things about what we can expect to see in terms of impacts at Eaton Canyon in this video. Let's begin. There are a few things I need to mention before I start listing off all the factors. First, this is a wash. Eaton Canyon is not a valley. Eaton Canyon is not a river. This is a wash. For millions of years, flash floods have been ripping through this place, depositing huge boulders, carving a, 200, 300 foot tall hill out of the side of the Los Angeles basin. And it leaves behind a number of interesting artifacts like this big cone Douglas fir pine tree. Flash floods happen out here. We have a history of flash flooding happening out here. We live in a unique period in 2024, as of today, in which it has been 19 years since a major flood ripped through here. That has given 19 years for all the vegetation to grow up, and 19 years for it to cover the wash and build, in my opinion, a Garden of Eden. This is a unique period that could end at any point, and it could end on Sunday night. The other important factor here is climate change. Humans are warming the planet right now faster than at any time in the last 66 million years. It has been 19 years of global warming since the last major flash flood. So we are entering uncharted territory on this planet. We do not know exactly what the future holds. All around the world, we are witnessing natural disasters that we did not think were climatologically possible happen. Right now, the Canadian Shield is experiencing its hottest winter ever by a wide margin. A flood will tear through this park again one day. If it's not Sunday night, maybe it's next year. Maybe it's later this winter. Maybe it's not for another 10 years, but it will happen again. My advice is to come out here on Saturday and walk the wash. Enjoy it, soak it up, take some photographs. Enjoy it. Okay. There are no two storms that are alike. When we go back in time and look at how other flash floods happened in Eaton Canyon, all of these storms had different parameters, different reasons why the flash flood is bad, different reasons why the flash flood could have been worse. A number of instances throughout history have happened where a flash flood was bound to happen, but it didn't. So let's talk about them, starting with the first flood that I know absolutely happened here at Eaton Canyon. And that was late January 1943. I believe it was January 22nd, 1943. An atmospheric river targeted Southern California, aimed right at the Los Angeles County mountains, did not move for 24 hours. Up at Mount Wilson, we saw 2 feet of rainfall in that 24 hours, and I could be wrong about this. This record may have been broken recently, but it set an all-time record for the highest 24-hour rain totals in the continental United States, save for tropical cyclones. I think that record might still stand to this day. 2 feet of rainfall in one day. Of course, if you include Hawaii in that statistic, we totally get crushed. But this is the continental United States. I don't have any stories of that flood. I don't have any photographs of that flood. I don't have any satellite imagery of that flood. But come on, 2 feet of rainfall on these slopes? Yeah, the big flood washed through this canyon and devastated it. Completely reordered the creek, wiped out all the western sycamores, probably wiped out some oak woodlands, moved boulders the size of cars down the canyon. That would have been quite the sight to see. Starting in 1952, we have satellite imagery of this canyon. And I can see, it's every few years or so, but I can see anytime there was a big flash flood in the canyon, all the vegetation in a certain area would get wiped out, and the creek would even change location. It would change route throughout the canyon. It's happened a number of times since satellite imagery began in 1952. And actually, before the first satellite imagery, I think there might have been a moderate flood in early 1952, because that first image shows very little vegetation at all in the wash. That flood in 1952 was probably the smallest one that I'm going to talk about on this list. We have to wait until 1969 for the next flood. In 1969, we got, a good week of rainfall, heavy rainfall, maybe an inch or two every single day, that really soaked up the soils. It could not take any more, and then another atmospheric river made landfall and dropped several inches of rain in 1 to 2 days on this canyon. It was too much, and a big wall of water came down the park. This was the flash flood that wiped out the El Dorado restaurant that sat where the equestrian area is today. I don't know what the civil engineers were doing, but the culvert that they allowed for Eaton Wash, like if I was standing as if I'm doing a jumping jack, I could touch either side. Look how much room nature needs for the flash floods in this canyon, from this hillside all the way over there. That's how much room it needs to expel all the water out of Upper Eaton Canyon. And they gave a 10-foot, 8-foot wide thing. I'm not surprised the El Dorado restaurant floated away, which is the point I'm trying to make. So, next up, 1980. We had a very similar series of storms actually that hit compared to 1969. The difference in 1980 was in 1978, 2 years prior, Upper Eaton Canyon burned during the Pinecrest fire. Whole area got torched. It wasn't a nuclear explosion fire that destroyed all the trees and left the landscape lifeless. It was a good fire. It was the type of fire that these types of ecosystems need in order to survive, beyond just a few decades. There are plants in Upper Eaton Canyon, especially pine trees, that require fire in order to break open the pine cones. So this is a good fire, but 2 years later, nonetheless, we had a big atmospheric river come through, a series of storms. I believe this was late February 1980. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. That was this big event. And I can see on satellite imagery, the whole creek gets completely reordered once again. It's a different park. 3 years later, I didn't realize this when I first looked at all the satellite imagery. 3 years later, it happened again, 1983. I believe this was late February into very early March when that series of storms hit. Whole creek changed around again. Then in 1993, Eaton Canyon burned during the Kanaloa fire. The fire was mostly in the lower part of the canyon. Everywhere beyond Idle Hour Campground was completely untouched. This was a pretty severe fire. It torched the landscape. It left a lot of the large trees standing, so it could have been a hotter, more extreme fire, but it was fueled by Santa Ana winds, and as I'm sure quite a few of you know, it burned 120 homes in the Altadena area, and it indirectly killed 2 people over in Bailey Canyon, I believe it was, that following March when another flash flood hit. When we see wildfires in landscapes such as this, when leaf material burns, it leaves behind a waxy substance that is hydrophobic, meaning it repels water. So when you get very heavy rainfall over these landscapes in a short amount of time, in the year immediately following a wildfire, all that water runs right into the nearest gully and shoots out of that canyon in a major flash flood. So in 1995, we didn't see any big storms, but there was a moderate to strong storm. The landscape had burned. The mudslides came down. In fact, I think the mudslides were notable in 1995 because Moist Canyon the creek ran right by the entrance to it, and there was so much mud that poured out of Moist Canyon in 1995 that it pushed the creek to the other side of the wash where the Nature Center sits. More to the middle, but to the other side of the wash where the Nature Center sits, where it still stands to this day, actually. The next flood, next flood, not the last one, was 2005. This actually came in the series of 2 atmospheric rivers. Late December 2004 and then January 2005, we got pummeled by an enormous amount of rainfall. However, this rain did not really come all in one day. There were heavy days. There were heavy rain rates, but it wasn't that massive. And as a result, it wasn't that heavy. As a result, we did not see as big of a flood as we saw in 1969 or 1980, at least according to how much of the wash was erased during that flood. 2005. It's been 19 years since. I was wondering if a big flood would hit in late February 2023, and that is the last date that I want to talk about in the flooding history of Eaton Canyon. In late February 2023, which is now our second wettest winter, actually it was our 4th wettest winter ever, but 2nd wettest water year ever, we got another atmospheric river come through. We got 8 inches of rainfall here at Eaton Canyon in over 2 days. The flooding potential was there, but there was one aspect of that storm that completely erased the flooding potential. And that was, there was snow falling on the tops of these peaks right here during most of the storm. The entire upper portion of the canyon was not contributing anything to the flood potential because it was all falling as snow. So we got a lot of rain down here. It wiped out some of our main trails, but the flooding in the canyon was non-existent. The wash was completely fine. That flooding could not come down all at once because so much of it fell as snow. And because it has now been 30 years since the last wildfire. So those 2 saving graces protected us in 2023 from what would have been a big flood. That was the 11th wettest 2-day period in our history. When looking at the records, I'm kind of limited in my ability to understand just how bad these storms are because all I have is single day records. If you get 7 inches in one morning, if you get 7 inches in 6 hours, we're in trouble. That's a flash flood ripping through this canyon. If you get 7 inches in 24 hours, we're fine. That's not going to cause much damage at all. But it looks exactly the same on the weather charts, on the historical weather records. So I don't have those 5-minute rain rates like I do today at the Eaton Canyon rain gauge that's on the Eaton Dam down by the reservoir. So I don't know exactly how bad these storms were. The other limiting factor right now is the canyon still hasn't burned. So what were the fire conditions like during these past flash floods? Well, 1980 had the fire 2 years prior in 1978. How bad was it? Wasn't all that bad in the Upper Canyon, but must have been bad in some areas and a little bit better in some areas. We know the footprint of the burn scar, but we don't know exactly how bad the fire was in each location. If the fire blew through, say, this landscape, left all the bushes alive but burned all the leaf litter, that's a very different situation than if the fire burns through this landscape and completely explodes all the trees and everything dies and there's no roots left to hold back the soil. So the fire was okay, but even if we had 2 storms that were of equal strength in 1980, they would have caused different flooding. 2 similar fires. There's no such thing. We simply do not have enough data to fully tell what is going to happen to this park Sunday night. But let's try anyways, because once we try, you can't win if you don't play. Once we try, then we will inevitably make mistakes, identify them, and work to correct it next time. Here are the 2 things that are working for us right now. 1, this has not been an exceptionally wet year. We have not had several inches of rainfall in the last couple of days that have really soaked up all the soils right now. Yeah, we got 1.5 inches yesterday. Okay, not good. Kind of makes the system a little bit worse, but we haven't been getting like a foot of rain in the last 7 days like they did in 1969 before that big flood ripped through. So that's a saving grace. The other saving grace is, again, as I mentioned, the canyon hasn't burned yet. Look at all of this vegetation whether it's invasive species or not, that are going to be holding down the soils and protecting our canyon from burning. If we had saw a fire in 2022 or 2023 out here, I would be so much worried. If we saw a fire, I would be like, yeah, come out here on Saturday, look at the creek, enjoy it, because this thing is getting totally reordered. This is where Hurricane Hillary comes into play. I thought Hurricane Hillary might be bad out here, but I swear, Hurricane Hillary was like the best possible outcome for a tropical storm making landfall, a direct landfall on Los Angeles County. That was amazing. We got half a foot of rain in the middle of summer, and we didn't see any flooding whatsoever. More importantly, it prevented any major wildfire from happening for the rest of the year. We still got fires, but they couldn't be of the explosive, super hot, kill everything, completely destroy the ecosystem type that we've been seeing in recent years due to climate change. That protected us. We haven't gotten a huge amount of rain so far this year, and the canyon hasn't burned. Those are our two good things. And here's for the bad news. The bad news is we did get an inch yesterday. The soils are wet. The bad news is last year was a wet year. This creek has been flowing like this. It's been flowing all the way down to the first crossing, except for 1 week in November. There's a lot of water still locked up in the canyon. The ensemble members, okay, let's talk about this for a second. Let's jump over to forecast modeling. We use ensemble members, which are 50 different miniature models associated with each deterministic model, which is like the bigger singular ones, in order to prevent major run-to-run shifts in our forecast. That's the whole reason why. My throat's getting dry. I've been talking for 17 minutes straight. On yesterday's 12Z model run, we jumped up 4 inches across the board. What? You do not jump 4 inches across the board on an ensemble member range, on a precipitation matrix. That is not normal. When I looked at that, I was like, I could not believe my eyes. That was shocking. Thank goodness the models have come back a little bit from that. But the reason why they shifted so much in a single model run is because the way the storm is setting up in the Eastern Pacific. Remember, the storm hasn't even developed yet. The one that's going to hit hasn't even developed yet. The way it's going to set up is sitting on a knife's edge between us getting an enormous amount of precipitation and us getting a lot but not cataclysmic amount. So when that run came out, there was observations that I was going towards the more cataclysmic side. So all the members jumped on board and were like, here we go. 12, 15, 18 inches of rainfall in 2 days, bring it. Well, now it kind of is back to a little bit, they're unsure of it. It never returned to as dry as it was before. It never went all the way back, but it's a little bit lower now. So can we still see a nuclear style storm where we get 20 inches of rainfall in the mountains behind us in 2 days? In 2 days? Maybe. There's still a 25% chance. That's pretty high. More likely, it sounds like this storm is going to be anywhere between very strong and a catastrophe. In between that. A big storm. Kind of like 1952. The weakest flood on that list that I gave you guys. This is going to be the biggest flood in Eaton Canyon in 19 years. We cannot handle 15 inches, what the icon is predicting right now, in 2 days. We cannot handle 12 inches in 2 days, which is what the European is forecasting. We cannot handle 10 inches in 2 days, which is what the GFS is forecasting. We have that range. We cannot handle it. It's not going to be the flood of the century out here at Eaton Canyon this weekend. But this is going to be a big event. I expect boulders moving. I expect trees coming down. I expect landslides, especially up in the mountain gorge section of the canyon. Enjoy the park on Saturday. Please get as many photos as possible. If you have photographs or stories of past floods at Eaton Canyon, including ones that I didn't even mention in this video because I don't know about them yet, please let me know about it because I love getting that information. It helps me understand future flash flood threats out here, and data is king, as we all know. So that's it. We'll be fine. I don't think any of these guys will move too much. Again, we're gonna see channels like here with water in them, not just back in the creek. It's hard to say though. It's really hard to say exactly how this flood is going to go, but you know, that's what happens. This is a wash. This happens. How do you think all these boulders got in this canyon? Well, that's it. Thanks for watching day 1653. Yeah, 53 of my daily trash pickup.